Well, good morning. Good to see everyone here this morning. Are you ready for Christmas? You are? Okay. I'm almost ready. Every year I think I'm going to start earlier. I did. I started early this year. But I'm still not done. Almost. I think I'll be all right. But my goodness, all the stuff, it just seems like things going on. You try to get places and do things, all the activities. But anyway, well, Christmas is almost upon us. Well, it's good to see everyone here this morning. A little chilly this morning. It's going to be spring again tomorrow. So if you haven't worn out your thermometer by now, you're just about to. It goes up and down and up and down. I guess this weekend was Chris Kindle, so we always get a blast of cold about that time, it seems, almost every year. So now we're due for a little warm-up for Christmas, then we'll go to cold for January, I suppose. But it's warm in here. Well, it's good to see you here. Let's ask the Lord's help in our Sunday School hour before we begin. Are there any requests you'd like to bring to the class? Let's continue to remember Brother Wilson. And okay.
The cyclone that hit, and it landed, came on at Mozambique, it will go across, like where the mission, it's predicted to go across where the mission is, where Tabitha Thule is.
Okay.
So, I mean, obviously it will have gone over, some land, but they're expecting,
A lot.
torrential rains, and so that will create flooding if the winds aren't also added. But
Okay.
remember them in prayer during this uncertain time.
All right.
For safety.
Right.
Continue to remember my cousin Keith's group that has brain cancer.
Okay. All right. Well, as we look to the Lord in prayer, Chris, would you ask the Lord's help this morning and remember these requests, please?
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for this morning. We gather in your house to worship you. We thank you, Lord, that we have the privilege and opportunity to pray this morning. This morning we're asking for the request that we're going to be Lord. We may not remember all of what you do. We think of this situation Sister Freer mentioned, Lord, you're able to do things that we can't do. And we ask that you would just protect Sister Cooley, keep her safe from all these storms that are coming. I pray that you would just have your hand upon her, help fan her quest for Sister his cousin. I pray, Lord, that you would just comfort him in these days that we don't know the situation exactly, Lord. Personally, myself, Lord, I pray that you just undertake and help him and speak to him, Lord. I pray. We think of our brother this morning as he leads in the Sunday school class. We pray that you would just open our hearts, challenge us to trust in you as the lesson is about. Lord, we pray that we just keep our hearts open to you this morning. Be with us in the service afterwards, and we'll just give you the praise for what you do. In Jesus' name.
All right. Our lesson this morning, taken from Isaiah. And I think we'll just go ahead and read the lesson to start with. The title of the lesson is Trusting God in the Dark. And it's taken from Isaiah, the 7th chapter, where King Ahaz is facing a threat from Syria and Israel. So it begins in chapter 7, verse 1. Isaiah chapter 7, verse 1. I'll go ahead and read the lesson, and we'll look into the lesson. Reads this way, And it came to pass in the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, that Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up to Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it. And it was told the house of David, saying, Syria is confederate with Ephraim, and his heart was moved, and the heart of his people, as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. Then said the Lord unto Isaiah, Go forth now to meet Ahaz, thou and Shear-jashub, thy son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool, in the highway of the fuller's field, and say unto him, Take heed and be quiet. Fear not, neither be faint-hearted, for the two tails of these smoking firebrands, for the fierce anger of Rezin with Syria and of the son of Remaliah. Because Syria and Ephraim and the son of Remaliah have taken evil counsel against thee, saying, Let us go up against Judah and vex it. Let us make a breach therein for us, and set a king in the midst of it, even the son of Tabiel. Thus saith the Lord God, it shall not stand, neither shall it come to pass. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin. Within 65 years shall Ephraim be broken, that it be not a people. And the head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is Remaliah's son. If you will not believe, surely ye shall not be established. So our key verse is taken from Isaiah 41:10, a little later in the book. It reads this way, "Fear not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of thy righteousness, of my righteousness." So we're looking at a lesson with troublesome times. We're looking at a king who's in fearful circumstances. But as we look at the world, we can relate to those things. I would say the words of the song, "In times like these, you need a Savior." Times like these, you need an anchor, have never been more appropriate than they are in the current condition of the world we live in. The words of admonition, "Be very sure your anchor holds and grips the solid rock," have never been more imperative than they are right now. We've just come through an election cycle. All looks hopeful. But I'm not so confident that it's all going to be fixed. Currently, it looks pretty dark in our nation. We've seen some dark things over the last 4 years. Be sure your anchor holds and grips the solid rock. Believe it or not, though, we in America are relatively sheltered yet from the storm that's shaking parts of our world. Most of us are concerned with the small blessings of life. We're concerned with how expensive the groceries are. We're concerned with the fact that we need another car. We're concerned with a lot of little things. You think those are big things. Well, in other parts of the world, Christians are in danger of are concerned about their very existence. Some parts of the world, life hangs by a thread. So while we're concerned about the small things of life, other people are concerned about some very dark times. The world is gearing up for something. C.S. Lewis wrote The Chronicles of Narnia, and in his last series in that book, he titled it The Last Battle. And I think the world is gearing up for the last battle. And it'll be a battle for the ages. We live in dark times. There are very few places to hide anymore. Some people just put their head in the sand and kind of ignore things. I know people that have said, well, I haven't paid any attention to the news for years. Well, it's troubling. And I don't let it trouble me too much, but it is troubling. But at the same time, if you put your head in the sand, all that will do is get your body cut off at the neck. You better see what's out there. You better have some idea what's taking place in your world. You better have some idea what's threatening your family. You need to at least be aware of the dangers. In our own nation, the pendulum of politics swings right, then left, in an ever-increasing arc, with every election. Most of us are relieved, as I said earlier, that the pendulum has swung to the right in the current political cycle. It appears it's going to swing a lot farther than it has for a long time. I hope that's effective, but I'm very concerned about the next time it swings left. The harder the swing, the more damage the wrecking ball does. Where does one look for shelter? Where does one cast their anchor when the storm threatens the destruction of everything we believe in and hold dear? Well, you won't find it with the wealthy and influential. A lot of people are putting their eggs in a lot of baskets. You won't find it with the wealthy and influential who are hedging their bets by buying properties in New Zealand or building bunkers out west or investing in mega yachts. They can just say bye-bye. They plan to bug out and leave you to your fate. You won't find it there. Beyond the external things that threaten our world, there are the things that currently threaten our personal worlds. Our own little world may seem upside down. We don't know what to do. We're in survival mode. You ever been there? Where do we find light in the darkness? Well, across the centuries, people have turned to religion. Many, or even most, have tried religion and their own ingenuities. They've tried to have a foot in both camps. Well, you won't find it by keeping one foot in the religious world and the other foot in the material world, as the king in this lesson does. So as we look at this lesson in the prophecies of Isaiah, we find a lesson with truth appropriate for our times. There's a big picture. There's the big picture of the prophecies of Isaiah. But then there's a lot of little snapshots within Isaiah that can apply to us. They mirror our own lives. So the nation of Israel has been divided. It's been divided since the end of Solomon's reign into the kingdom of Judah and Benjamin and the kingdom of Israel, which comprised the other 10 tribes. Now, at times there was relative peace between the two nations. At other times there was rivalry, which resulted in skirmishes and battles. It does seem up to this point there's never been a sustained campaign to establish supremacy by either side. They've had some battles and gone back to their territories. But in our lesson today, the situation has changed. Israel and Syria have established a confederacy. They're determined to conquer Jerusalem and set their own king on the throne. The political situation is dire. Now, we just talked about dire circumstances. So in order to relate, I talked about our circumstances. That's what's going on in Israel, or in Judah right now. So verse 1 sets the stage. It's a summary of events soon to take place. It gives us the outcome of events before the lesson, actually. In verse 2, we go back to the events leading up to the siege that's mentioned in verse 1. Verse 1 reads this way, "And it came to pass in the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, that Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up toward Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it." So it mentions several kings. Uzziah had been a righteous king until his later years. He became proud. Because of his pride, he went into the temple to burn incense unto God. Now that was the job of the priest. Uzziah was not consecrated by God to burn incense. Only the priests were. So he took a position that did not belong to him. Only the priests were consecrated for the holy work of the temple. So Uzziah's pride brought the judgment of God on him. He became a leper until his death. His son Jotham then reigned 16 years in his stead. He was a righteous king. 2 Chronicles 27:6 reads this way, "So Jotham became mighty because he prepared his ways before the Lord his God." After his death, Ahaz, the man in today's lesson, inherited the kingdom and reigned for 16 years also. Ahaz was a wicked king. He had a righteous grandfather, he had a righteous father. He departed from all that God commanded. In 2 Chronicles 28:2 through 28:5, read this way, "For he walked not in the ways of the kings of Israel, and made also molten images for Baalim. Moreover, he burnt incense in the valley of the son of Hinnom, and burnt his children in the fire after the abominations of the heathen, whom the Lord had cast out before the children of Israel. He sacrificed also and burnt incense in the high places, and on the hills, and under every green tree. Wherefore the Lord his God delivered him into the hand of the king of Syria, and they smote him, and carried away a great multitude of them captives, and brought them to Damascus. And he was also delivered into the hand of the king of Israel, who smote him with a great slaughter." So 2 Kings 15:37 then records the initial incursions, along with 2 Chronicles. We've just read the initial incursions of Syria and Israel into Judah, and 2 Kings 15:37 also record those initial incursions. In those days the Lord began to send against Judah Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah. So he's already suffered some defeats. After his defeat by the Syrians, he built altars unto the gods of Syria because he thought their gods helped him in battle. This is Ahaz. 2 Chronicles 28:24 tells us he built altars to various gods in every corner of Jerusalem. It seems this lesson today records a second incursion into Judah. Now there seems to be some confusion about the incursions into Judah but what I could determine, it seems this is a second incursion into Judah. Syria and Israel have joined forces. They formed a confederacy with the intention of setting a king friendly to their alliance on the throne of Jerusalem. Their intention was to strengthen themselves against the Assyrian kingdom. That's the backdrop of today's lesson. And so it was told the house of David, saying, Syria is confederate with Ephraim, and his heart was moved, and the heart of his people, as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. So what Isaiah is doing here is presenting a very striking and poetic picture of the fears of this king and his subjects. In their minds, they've already lost the battle. Now, in World War II, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, the people of the United States became enraged. People everywhere rose up, wanted to go fight. They took the fight to the enemy. This is the opposite of the picture of Ahaz and Judah. In describing the alarm that Judah felt, Isaiah gives us a picture of trees in violent wind that are nearly blown over by the force of the wind. The winds of fear have overwhelmed the people of Israel. If you've ever seen palm trees in a hurricane, they don't lean into the wind. They're laid back. That's the picture we have here. These people have heard the tidings of the confederacy of Israel and Syria, and they're blown over. King Ahaz knows this is a battle he can't win in the field. His only chance is to retreat within the walls of Jerusalem and hold out as long as he can. So our lesson today finds him outside the city, surveying the water sources in preparation for a long and protracted siege. God sends Isaiah to meet him. Then the Lord said unto Isaiah, Go forth now to meet Ahaz, thou and Shear-jashub, thy son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool in the highway of the fuller's field. Now Isaiah is a true prophet of God. God communicated to Judah through Isaiah. What Isaiah said came to pass. It's always been that way. The true wisdom that comes from God comes to pass. Isaiah is instructed here to take his son Shear-jashub, meaning a remnant shall return, as a sign from God that however much and however wicked they are, however much they may be punished for their sins, the nation would not be totally destroyed until the great deliverer would come. Ahaz is looking for a deliverer, but he's not looking for Isaiah or the deliverance Isaiah promises. Ahaz is facing insurmountable odds. In his mind, he thinks help comes from around him. In his mind, he thinks he needs to seek the help of Assyria, the Assyrian Empire, in order to survive. So as we've seen, Ahaz has already been hedging his bets, trying to have the best of all worlds. The most important thing to Ahaz is the success of Ahaz. One might think that with all the religions he embraced, he was a seeker after truth. But we've seen that he'd sacrifice his own children in order to save his own skin. He sacrificed his children to Moloch in the valley of Hinnom in worship to a god that he thought would help him. Loving parents sacrifice themselves. Ahaz sacrificed his children. Now he's backed against the wall in terror at what is apparently coming. So Ahaz has been sent to this wicked king with a message of hope. Let me back up here. Ahaz has been sent to this wicked king with a message of hope, if Ahaz will receive it. Ahaz is in a panic, and Isaiah says to him, Take heed and be quiet. Fear not, neither be faint-hearted for the two tails of these smoking firebrands, for the fierce anger of Rezin with Syria and of the son of Remaliah. The word take heed in the Hebrew language meant keep yourself, or see that you be quiet. Calm down now. Don't be alarmed and fearful. Then Isaiah says, do not be faint-hearted, meaning do not be soft-hearted, implying instead be strong and fearless. So this picture of Ahaz, who's terrified, who's in a panic, who thinks he needs to appeal to Assyria, it gives us a picture of a man who's fearful and upset. Men who are fearful and upset make rash and unsound decisions. when they need to make sound decisions. They're slaves to their fear. They'll compromise everything that is right to save their own skin. Now, have you ever seen that? You'll see someone who won't stand up in the place they work because they'll be scorned. You'll see someone else who will compromise their integrity because they're afraid they'll lose their job. Many who are fearful and upset make rash and unsound decisions. They're slaves to their fear. They'll compromise everything that is right to save their own skin. They only make the situation worse. Now, Isaiah is not saying here there's no need to prepare for battle. There's no need to prepare the defenses of the city. Jerusalem would suffer an attack, but the attacking forces would not be able to succeed. So sometimes we can talk about trusting in God, but sometimes there's something for us yet to do. And so sometimes when we talk about trusting in God, we're almost we're as foolish as the person who trusted himself, because when we trust in God, there's action to take place. So Isaiah is not saying, don't prepare for battle, don't prepare the defenses of the city. Ahaz really was facing the threat of an attack by allied forces. But in the mind of Ahaz, the threat was exaggerated. The threat was bigger than his God. Those people we just talked about, they're Christians. And then they go to work. And they're required to compromise their integrity. And the threat becomes bigger than God. If I lose my job, I'll lose my car. If I lose my job, I lose my house. If I lose my job, what am I going to do? The threat's bigger than God. Well, Ahaz, in his mind, the threat is bigger than his God. Action was called for. The difference was is in what each man trusted in. Isaiah's confidence was in the God of all might, who had everything perfectly under control. Now, in the last election, we saw some things take place. There was a lot of suspicion about the integrity of the voting in the election, and a lot of people were unnerved. And I remember Brother Wilson talking right after the election, saying he wasn't at all concerned. God has everything under his control. And I remember thinking, well, that's true, but is there something we should do? And I'm not saying that there was something we should have done. I'm just saying, then we saw January 6th, and we saw people who thought they should do something. And it really accomplished nothing. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't have at least been there, registered their disapproval. But God had everything perfectly in control. 4 years later, we've seen a difference. 4 years later, and like I said, I don't place my hopes in an administration. But 4 years later, the truth has come out. God did have things under control. They couldn't destroy that man. They tried everything they could. There were attempts on his life twice, and he won the election. God had everything in control. Now, we sometimes can get pretty upset about what's going on politically. And if things go south politically, it bothers us. But we don't have to be thinking that all is lost. Well, that's where Ahaz is. All is lost. His trust, the battle and outcome belonged to God. Ahaz's only hope was in the defenses of his city and the might and power of his armies. In his confidence, Isaiah looked at the kings of Syria and Israel calmly and saw them as God saw them. They're only the tails of smoking firebrands. In other words, they're just smoking sticks from a dying fire that will soon go out. That's the way God looks at the events of the world. There may be a lot of rhetoric, there may be a lot of talk. Sometimes there's some serious implications. But God saw these men for what they really were, and he knew that soon the threat would not be there, not much fire there. It was a practice of the Hebrews to call a man by his father's name when they wanted to show their contempt for him. A man has done nothing noteworthy. He's a loser. He's a no-name. So you call him by his father's name. So we would say, that son of Stephen's. Well, Stephen got the notice there. he got the recognition, but who's that son of Stephen's? Well, Isaiah shows utter contempt for the king of Israel and calls him this son of Ramalius. These two kings thought they were going to engage in a campaign of shock and awe. Instead, they were the ones soon to be in shock and awe. God says this smoking tail of a burnout firebrand, these smoking tails of a burnout firebrand are soon to be extinguished. Because Syria, Ephraim, and the son of Remaliah have taken evil counsel against thee, saying, let us go up against Judah and vex it. Let us make a breach therein for us, and set a king in the midst of it, even the son of Tabiel. These two plan to set aside the throne of David. God said, because these two have planned to set aside the throne of David, they're nothing but smoking firebrands. God had promised David through Nathan the prophet that as long as there was a king in Jerusalem, a son of David would sit on the throne. In 2 Samuel 7:16 we read, and thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee, thy throne shall be established forever. Now that prophecy was also part of the Messianic prophecy in which in the future under Roman rule, Israel looked for a son of David to come as deliver Israel from the hand of all their enemies. So it had a current prophecy and a future prophecy, and we know that Judah was taken away and became captive of the Babylonian Empire. There was not a king sitting on the throne, but Judah was not destroyed. God brought Judah back and placed him right back in that land. So the promise was carried out. And Jesus came as the son of David and sits on that throne forever. So God had permitted these two kings to make incursions into Judah because Judah had turned to the worship of heathen gods. But now in their arrogance, they have made a big mistake. They have proposed to defeat the purposes of God. God had made a promise to David. When he purposes to do something, the arrogance of two kings who've gotten too big for their britches can't change what God has purposed to do. Isaiah 7:7 reads this way, thus saith the Lord God, it shall not stand, neither shall it come to pass. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin, and within 65 years shall Ephraim be broken, that it be not a people. And the head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is Remaliah's son. If you will not believe, surely you shall not be established. If Ahaz did not know God's purpose concerning the throne of David, he should have known. He had neglected the worship of God and chosen instead to appease the gods of earth. He was hedging his bets in all directions, making sure that he had all bases covered, and instead of making him stronger, his actions made him weaker. Isaiah assured Ahaz that Jerusalem would not be defeated by these two kings. Then he tells King Ahaz, if you will not believe, surely you shall not be established. The word focus in the Teacher's Quarterly says this, these words are meant to convey the idea of firmness, reliability, stability, and endurance. John Oswald translates it this way, unless you hold firm in faith, you will not be made firm in life. God is offering Ahaz and all of Judah the security and permanence they are looking for if they will return to him. To believe God, he said, if you will not believe, you shall not be established. To believe God would mean to forsake all other confidences. It would mean to worship God alone. I think we could read it this way, if you will not believe, you cannot be established. It's impossible to be established without faith. So as we look at this world, and we look at our troubles, and we look at the dark times we face, it's impossible to rest secure without faith. The next verses are not in our lesson, but they're part of the story. The next verses read this way, Isaiah 7:10 through 16 read this way. Moreover, the Lord spake again unto Ahaz, saying, ask thee a sign of the Lord thy God. Ask it either in the depth or in the height above. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, neither will I tempt God. And he said, hear ye now, O house of David, is it a small thing for you to weary men, but you will weary my God also? Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Butter and honey shall he eat, that he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good. For before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land which thou abhorrest shall be forsaken of both her kings. Now God would have given Ahaz any sign he asked for in order to prove that what Isaiah said was true. Ahaz refused the proof. His mind was already made up. He had already chosen to make an alliance with the Assyrian Empire. So in a dual prophecy for the present and the future, God gave a sign anyway to this king who refused to hear his prophet. Barnes says this: its general meaning is this, that in a short time, either within the time when a young woman, then a virgin, should conceive and bring forth a child, before that child would grow old enough to distinguish between good and evil, the calamity which Ahaz feared would entirely be removed. Now we know that prophecy to refer to the coming of Christ, but it also had a current prophecy that Ahaz himself would recognize. Ahaz continued to choose his own path. His alliance with the Assyrians proved to be a disappointment. 2 Chronicles 28:20 and 21 read this way: And Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came unto him and distressed him, but strengthened him not. For Ahaz took away a portion out of the house of the Lord and out of the house of the king and of the princes, gave it unto the king of Assyria, but he helped him not. So the title of this lesson is Trusting God in the Dark. Now Ahaz was truly in a dark time in his life. If you're facing the circumstances he faced, it was dark. But God offered him hope, and he refused God's offer. As a result, King Ahaz had trouble to the end of his reign. Now we might think that's just an Old Testament story, has very little to do with us today. The reality is that the truth of the story is as true for us today as it was for the king who found himself overwhelmed by the circumstances of life. The world we live in, as we talked about earlier, is just as threatening, just as fearful as the world this king found himself in. Our world is changing rapidly. It seems we can't keep up with the changes. With this coming AI, we don't even know what to believe anymore. It can make up anything. If you've seen any of the memes that the Trump people have put out recently, it's pretty convincing. It's not real. They're just putting it out as advertisement or just tweaking the left. Our world is changing rapidly. Political situations all around the world are unstable. The political situation in our own nation continues to change. It seems at times if we're on the verge of another world war. Keep seeing in the news, World War III watch. Well, I don't know how close we are, but there's a lot of things going on over in Europe, Northern and Eastern Europe, that are pretty unsettling. We could be in a war. It seems, strange things are happening in our own nation. Have you been looking at the news lately? There have been drones coming in from the sea all over New Jersey. People are alarmed. The governor has asked for help. The current government of our nation is obviously concealing things and lying to us. No one knows what these drones are. They're surmising. The current administration says there's no threat to us, but if they can't tell us what they are, how do we know that? Strange things are happening in our own nation. Fearful things. How would you like to be living there? 50 drones come in. You have no idea what they are. You might find it interesting, but it's unsettling. We're in dark times in our world. We face dark and uncertain times in our own lives. The message Isaiah had for this king is the message God still has for us today. Take heed. Be quiet. Fear not. Don't be faint-hearted. Doesn't take away the fact that we may still go through dark times, but God has promised to be with us in those dark times. In the dark days of your life, if you put your trust in God, you can face fearful circumstances with calmness and courage. Isaiah was calm. Ahaz was all worked up. Christians suffer the same things everyone else does. Wars come to their lands, they suffer the ravages of war. Health fails, sickness comes, they suffer the effects of sickness and disease. Financial reverses come, they suffer loss. Political situations change, they suffer the persecutions of an unfriendly government. The difference is in where they place their trust. We do not need to fear that all is lost. In the darkest of times, we still believe that Jesus has come to give us hope and a future. The Apostle Paul knew something of dark times, and this is what he wrote. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. Our key verse again is this: Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee. Yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. So the title of our lesson has been Trusting God in the Dark. And sometimes we sound like a broken record, talking about the dark times in our world. And sometimes in our own lives it gets pretty dark. But it's where you put your trust. Isaiah counseled Ahaz to believe. If you will not believe, surely you shall not be established. But the opposite is true. If you believe, you can have certainty and firmness and calmness and courage. Thank you for your attention. Let's stand and we'll be dismissed with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done,
in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever.